You know, the 1994 was a very historic election from many perspectives. But if you look at that election with an eye of an election administrator, it was a very nightmarish election because we didn't have a voters' roll, making planning and logistics very difficult. People had different types of identity documents that they used, that people could vote wherever they wanted. There was no voters' roll. There was centralized counting. There is nothing as nightmarish like carrying ballot papers from the voting station to a central place. For counting purposes. A lot of things can go wrong in that process. We have since evolved. We now have a national common voters roll that was compiled for the first time in 1999 for the 1999 election. That voters roll at that time had 18.1 million voters. And we're now talking a voters roll for 25 million South Africans who are registered. We have perfected the logistics, and we have electronic systems that we use that enhance our efficiency. If you look at all our systems, whether we're talking about candidate nomination, compilation of the voters roll, our logistics, we do our logistics through the logistics information system. So all our systems are electronic. I listen usually with interest when people talk about electronic voting. And there is a misnomer there because people don't quite understand. I mean, our systems are electronic, except that we don't use an electronic ballot paper. We have a ballot paper. We have a paper ballot paper, and that is almost the only system that is manual. Also the counting, we count manually the ballot papers, but the compilation of the results is electronic. So we have come a long way, and we have created world-class systems, I must say, and our systems hold their own, you know, among the systems of other election management bodies on the continent and globally. We're using paper ballots means that we use, in 2009, we used almost 600 tons of paper. And depending on the number of parties that are going to contest, we might use even more. Because in 2009, 18 parties contested the elections. We're likely to have more, maybe we'll have between 18 and 25 this time around. So it's a huge operation that also requires us to ensure that we have enough bandwidth, you know, to capture, because the results will be captured. Lots of result slips will be captured at the same time into the system, and we have to have enough bandwidth for them to be able to filter through in a shortest period of time without the system crashing. We're not highly reliant on local government. We have to employ a person called the municipal electoral officer, and usually our municipal electoral officers are senior government officials. But for local, for a national election, the MEO really does not have a big role to play. You need an MEO for the local election, because that's a person who declares the results at that level. But obviously for infrastructure, you know, we do depend on a lot of government departments, because if, for instance, we have floods on election day and some roads are not passable, you'll then have to rely on SANDF to to transport the ballot papers to the areas that have been affected by floods.
Yeah.
Or if it rains shortly before an election, you then have to rely on roads and public works and roads to ensure that they fix the road to make it possible. So, you know, an election is interesting because you have to anticipate everything that might go wrong and have a contingency plan. You know, small things that people do not think of because you can train your electoral staff, and there are lots of them, and on election day in the morning, the presiding officer becomes sick. Then you have to be able to replace them. You know, small details. You find that the person who has the keys, you know, will talk about keys, and people say, why are keys such an important aspect? Keys for the voters, for the voting station. You have to ensure that the day before an election, you tick to say, does everybody have the key to the voting station? And sometimes you find that if you use a school as a voting station, that somebody has disappeared with the key. Yeah. So there are lots of small things that can go wrong and just disorganize the process. It's not the first time that South Africans abroad will be voting. What is new this time around is that we had voter registration abroad, which we never had before. South Africans who are out of the country, and we're talking here those who live abroad but they're still South Africans, and those who will be traveling from South Africa and will be abroad on business or holiday, they will vote at our missions abroad because those are South African territories. The votes overseas will be counted in this country.